However, to understand that's when it's given to us in the code that is we are
Thank you so much. So we're going to have a quick round of introductions before we get into the reading of the speech and the welcome remarks. So I'll begin. My name is Zanji Sinkara. I'm the Communications Officer at Transparency International Zambia. Next to me is Mr. Bright Chizonde. He's the Advocacy Policy and Research Manager. Next to him is the Executive Director, Mr. Maurice Kalabukanyambe. After him is Mr. Raymond Butale, is the Head of Programs here at TIZ. And then at the far end there is Mr. Tommy Singongi. He's the Public Finance Management Coordinator. So his thematic area has changed in the past few months. I was trying to figure out if it's still, if I got the right one. So now we can begin from there. You can just introduce yourself, the media house that you belong to.
What you tackle but also we expect you to take this conversation on this. Having said that, I'll not dive into the because so let's get into this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdul. I think we're going to move into the presentation, which will be done by
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you again. So we briefly go through the presentation. We thought it was important before we go into our speech, so we should have a deeper context on where this is being done from, because of what the results are of this analysis. So we briefly go through the presentation, highlighting some of the key findings and questions we're asking, and also perhaps explaining a bit more about the methodology, because there are a number of issues that are raised that we have mentioned in the public media. in the year 2023 on community projects. So there is limited capacity among some local authorities and constituencies in implementing the CDF program. The CDF program components such as community projects and key boundary. The second question, is there evidence of mismanagement in the CDF program? So it's not a political question, it's a research question, right? Is there any evidence? Are we finding any evidence of mismanagement? The answer is yes, there is evidence of mismanagement. The Auditor General highlighted three irregularities, and these are failure to recover loans, failure to account for funds, change of project without appraisal. Of course, we understand what failure to recover loan implies, right? So this you have given out each month to the different people that applied for them, and then the government expects to recover those money. Those people are not paying back the money, and that is the bigger portion of all of this. So about 250 million kwacha was not recovered after being given out as loan. Then we have failure to account for funds. Failure to account for funds, of course, explains to the situation of lack of documentation, lack of explanation on how the resources were used, and this accounts for 8.2 million. And lastly, we have change of project without approval, and this means that setting up project was approved for a particular reason. For example, people are given money to go and do maybe to grow chicken, for example, and then they have changed from chicken to goat or to cow without any approval, without any citizen approval, or they have not been done anything well. Right? And so this is what we are doing. So this is this management in terms of public resources. We also decided to rank the local authorities with respect to this management of funds. So which local authorities are on the top of the list with respect to these different financial regularities that we have highlighted. So change of projects, you can see we have 2.1 million, and it's only 1 million for that particular category. Account for funds, we have Lusaka, which is the million, 5.4 million budget, failure to account for funds. Now that is very concerning because Lusaka is supposed to have high capacity at the local authority. So why are they failing to account for how these funds were utilized? And then failure to recover loans, this is where the bigger problem is. So obviously, I already mentioned that this is over 240 million budget. Now if you look at all of these are in millions, and this is where they are distributed. So we have Monde, Choma, Alone, Alamo, Lusaka, Kinga, Ipeke, Agabinda. These are all funds that were given out as loans, but not recovered. Results indicate that Lusaka City Council appears among the top 10 local authorities for all three financial irregularities assessed, while Mungu and the Soka Town Councils appear on 2 of the 3 categories. It is also notable that the majority of the top 10 councils failing to recover loans are in the ruling UPND party's political strongholds, which raises concerns on possible patronage and abuse of the CDF program by political entities. So going back to that graph, you can see the different local authorities where they are located. And you know, if you talk about the politics of this country, where the UPND wins most votes. And so this is a concerning picture in terms of why we are advancing loans and people are not paying back the loans, mostly in those particular countries. So the Auditor General also highlighted the major governance weaknesses. So the third question is, what are the major governance weaknesses? So the Auditor General was able to highlight the major governance weaknesses in all of these areas. I'll just mention a few. Let me start with budget management. We have ineffective monitoring, which has led to available funds remaining unspent at the end of the financial year. With respect to procurement and asset management, we have weak quality control processes, poor contract management, and lack of follow-up by the local authorities that are procuring entities. So all of these are creating loopholes or for linkages to financial resources. On community projects, we have weak monitoring and accountability mechanism, resulting in delayed implementation of projects and culminating in project backlogs. So local authorities still implementing projects from 2022 in 2024 because of all of these challenges that we are seeing. When it comes to soft loans, we have ineffective loan recovery processes and weak enforcement of penalty provisions. So there is weak enforcement of penalty provisions if someone does not pay that loan in accordance with the schedule that they are supposed to follow in terms of the payment. On bursary management, we have inadequate pre-disbursement communication and poor disbursement monitoring. So here is to verify that the people you are saying you are paying for in terms of bursaries are actually going to school. Or once you have paid, to make sure that they are actually going to be able to get that education or that skill that you are paying for. So there is inadequate monitoring or verification. And so some people are being paid for and they're not in those particular lending institutions. So essentially, the analysis indicates that the CDF program has major governance weaknesses. On the left, you are able to see that it's like a tap which is just leaking resources. That is what we are observing in terms of the governance weaknesses highlighted. So this is due to limited institutional capacity of some local authorities. Of course, saying that the prevalence of these weaknesses indicates that there is a high risk of financial weaknesses and corruption in all the components of the CDF program. So this means that resources allocated to this program have a high chance of being abused or leaking or being abused due to corruption because of these governance weaknesses highlighted. Let me now move on to 5, which is the analysis of provincial performance. Here you are able to see how the different provinces performed with respect to utilization of resources. Of course, the best performing on utilization of community project funds is Eastern Province, which you are able to see as the very total, 83.55%. It was interesting, yesterday we had a meeting with local authorities from Eastern Province because we wanted to get more insights with respect to what they are doing well, because they are the best practice for now, right? Indicating how they are able to implement community projects to that extent, while all the other provinces are at less than 60% in terms of community project utilization. So in terms of funds allocated to community projects, the 10 performers were Eastern Province with utilization rate of 83.55%, followed by Northwestern at 54.47%. You can see there's a significant gap between the two, while the least performer was Central at 17.8%. So it is also notable that 8 out of the 10 provinces had utilization rates lower than 50% in community projects. In terms of overall utilization of funds allocated to the program, Northwestern Province was the best performer with the utilization rate of 58.44%, followed by Copper Belts 58.4%, and Eastern at 57.7%. Central, Wapula, Northern, and utilization rates less than 50%, Northern being the least performer with a utilization rate of 37.9%. That is for total funds. It is notable that all the 10 provinces have utilization rates of less than 60% of the funds made available. Now let's look at the constituencies with respect to total funds allocated in terms of utilization. Obviously, we know the constituencies 156, so we could put the list of entire constituencies here. So what we did is to pick out the best top 10, or the best performers, the top 10 performers, and the bottom 10 performers on the list. So you're able to see that there are some constituencies which are actually able to utilize all the funds, and then we have some constituencies which are, lagging behind significantly. Of course, very concerning is Lusaka Central at 14.61% in terms of utilization. We have Kasama Central at 22.84%. So that is the list of the bottom and also the top 10. We also have an analysis of performance with respect to utilization of community project funds. So here you are able to see the constituencies which are doing well in terms of utilization of funds that are earmarked for allocated to community projects. And so you're able to see that some of them have already used all the funds for community projects. That's 2023, while others are also at a significant behind. Tunjumwezi, for example, is 0.39% utilization of funds for community projects. We have Kawata at 2.91%, Solwezi Central 3.99%, Bala at 5.24%, Kabwe Central 5.71%, and the list goes on for the bottom 10 performers. The top performing constituencies in terms of CDF funds utilization for the total funds made available to the constituency were Rufunsa, Ron, and Kasha, with all recorded utilization rates of more than 100%, and were followed by Nimba at 96.5%. The least performers were Kaputa, Chilubi, Chawama, Chimba Milonga, Kasama Central, and Lusaka Central, which I have already mentioned is at 14.61%. Just to take note that there is an overall base performer on both total funds utilization and community project funds utilization in 2023, which is Nimba constituency. It appeared on both rankings for top performers for utilization of total funds and also utilization of funds for community projects. So let's now move on to some of the key conclusions. The 2023 audit of the CDF reveals the concerning picture of limited capacity of local authorities, significant financial irregularities and governance weaknesses, as well as underperformance of constituencies in utilizing CDF funds. The analysis reveals that there is limited capacity among local authorities and constituencies in implementing the CDF program, thereby putting into question the political motive behind the annual successive increase in budget allocations. The Lusaka City Council is among the top local authorities where all these three financial irregularities are highest based on value, while the majority of the top 10 councils failing to recover loans are in the ruling party's political strongholds, which raises concerns on possible patronage and abuse of the CDF program by political elites. The prevalence of the major governance weaknesses indicates that there is a high risk of financial leakages and corruption in all the components of the program. So those are the major conclusions. I'll allow my executive director to give the recommendations as part of his speech after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Audit. We're now going to
All right, good morning once again. So Mr. Mkali already welcomed you, so I will not welcome you. I'm still you. Okay, so as we have just heard from the presentation, we of course conducted a very comprehensive analysis of the CDF audit report for the year ended 31st December 2023. And the idea for this was to encourage improved local level implementation of the CDF program through improved central government monitoring and public scrutiny. Now, we believe that this analysis and its publication will contribute to enhanced protection and accountability of public resources and strengthen citizens' demand for transparency and accountability in public resource management at local levels. In terms of approach, the analysis, of course, asks critical questions around the management of the CDF, including the capacity to utilize the CDF allocations, the scale of corruption and mismanagement, and the major governance weaknesses. Now, it is important to note, as we heard, that TIZ did not collect this information directly from constituencies. We simply made use of the tables contained in the 2023 CDF Auditor report to rank the performance of provinces and constituencies with respect to the utilization of funds made available through the program. Now, our analysis, as we have seen, reveals a very concerning picture of limited capacity of local authorities, significant financial irregularities and governance weaknesses, as well as underperformance of constituencies in utilizing CDF funds. It is deeply concerning that despite increased CDF allocations over the past few years, many constituencies have struggled to effectively utilize these resources. According to our assessment, less than 42% of the funds allocated for community projects were utilized, while around 53% of the total CDF allocation remained unspent. In terms of funds utilization across the provinces, again, this is something that we saw. 8 out of the 10 provinces had utilization rates which were lower than 50% on community projects, and in all 10 provinces, the utilization rates were less than 60% for the total funds that were made available. This analysis therefore reveals that there is limited capacity among local authorities and constituencies in implementing the CDF program. And for us, this puts into question the political motive behind the annual successive increases in the CDF budget allocations. Further, the 2023 audit identifies 3 main categories of financial irregularities in the management of the CDF program. These include change of projects without approval, failure to account for funds, and failure to recover loans. The highest irregularity in terms of value is failure to recover loans at over 254 million kwacha, compared to failure to account for funds at 8.3 million kwacha and change of projects without approval at 9.4 million. Surprisingly, Lusaka City Council appears among the top 10 local authorities for all 3 financial irregularities assessed, while Mongu and Isoka Town Councils appear on 2 of the 3 categories. It is also notable, as we saw in the presentation, that the majority of the top 10 councils failing to recover loans are in the ruling UPND party's political strongholds. And for us, really, this raises some very serious concerns on the possible patronage and abuse of the CDF program by political elites. The CDF program, of course, also has critical weaknesses which undermine the program's objective of delivering essential social and economic services to the Zambian populace. These include ineffective budget monitoring, which has led to available funds remaining unspent at the end of the financial year, and weak monitoring and accountability mechanisms, which have resulted in delayed implementation of projects and culminated in backlogs when it comes to project implementation. There is also poor contractor management, due diligence, and weak enforcement of penalties, leading to abandoned projects after making advance payments to various contractors. The prevalence of all these governance weaknesses indicates that there is a very high risk of financial leakages and corruption in all components of the CDF program. So in light of these findings, TIZ recommends for the halting of any further increases in the budget allocation to the CDF program until there is evidence of improved monitoring and institutional capacity to mitigate the high corruption risks and financial leakages that we have highlighted. Further, we call upon local authorities to improve information sharing through community dissemination meetings, local authority websites, and the media on the status of project implementation. Given the findings on possible patronage in the CDF program implementation, talking about political patronage, of course, TIZ calls upon the UPND administration to take action to eliminate the dominance of political elites in the CDF program by encouraging broader and non-partisan participation for all citizens. So following our dissemination of the preliminary findings of this analysis, which we did not too long ago, several local authorities, members of parliament, and other government officials have reached out to engage with us and to share additional information on the challenges they face in implementing the CDF program. These discussions revealed that beyond local level issues, there are critical governance and institutional challenges that require urgent attention if the CDF program is to function effectively. These include two main ones, which I will mention. The first is government red tape in the approval process. Now, the lengthy bureaucratic approval processes for large contracts have significantly hampered the ability of local authorities to implement community projects. The delays caused by these procedural bottlenecks hinder timely service delivery, project completion, and thus accounting for the lower utilization rates on community project funds. Additionally, the varying utilization rates across different constituencies may also be due to the choice of projects, as construction-based projects suffer the most delays in the approval process when compared to other projects. Secondly, challenges with the electronic government procurement system. Now, while the EGP system is an essential tool for enhancing transparency and accountability in the procurement process, local authorities noted that it is often unreliable, frequently experiencing downtimes that delay the uploading of tenders and thereby exacerbating project implementation inefficiencies at that local level. Further, there is also limited capacity among users, including both public officials and suppliers or contractors, leading to difficulties and delays in managing various processes of procurement. Now, while the findings of our 2023 CDF audit analysis resulted in a very positive and solution-oriented discourse in some councils, other stakeholders have chosen to discredit our report findings, despite the fact that all the information presented originates from the Auditor General's official CDF report. We reiterate that the Office of the Auditor General has a constitutional mandate to conduct audits as an essential accountability measure. And it is the role of civil society organizations such as ourselves to analyze and simplify these reports for public understanding. And we are happy that our analysis of the 2023 CDF audit has generated so much interest from various stakeholders. As I conclude, we'd like to encourage all stakeholders, including policymakers, civil society actors, and the general public, to take keen interest in the findings of the 2023 CDF audit report. The full report is available on the Auditor General's website, and TIZ will continue to disseminate the key insights and infographics based on our analysis of this very important document. TIZ remains committed to promoting transparency, accountability, and good governance in the management of public resources, and we urge the government to take swift action in addressing the inefficiencies and weaknesses in the CDF program, so as to ensure that it serves its intended purpose of fostering local level development as part of the wider decentralization agenda. I thank you for your attention, and may God bless some. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're now going to have 15 minutes, or maybe even shorter, 15 minutes of question and answer session. So if you have any questions in regards to the analysis of the CDF report, feel free to ask them. Any questions? Darius, you don't have questions today. I can see you thinking. Any questions? Oh yes, Francis.
Good morning, Francis. My name is Mike. I've followed the report attentively, but what came into my mind was whether we took into consideration the purpose of this CDF, because it has changed twice the mechanism on how it's supposed to administer. Some of the recommendations, some of the observations made here were made earlier, and they thought they are going to expire. My question is, in your opinion, do you think this CDF was hurriedly introduced before people educated on how to use it, or maybe it was just put because they wanted to use it as a political tool.
Okay, any other questions? Anyone else before we get a response to that? Okay, I'll allow the high table to
Okay, okay, thank you, Mr. Maingaila. Very interesting question. I think the first point really to make very clear, and I think we need to make this very clear. We are not against CDF. I think that has to be made very clear from the onset. Okay, CDF is a brilliant development program with the potential to actually make a real difference in the lives of local communities and in the lives of so many people. And I think what we have seen from successive government, maybe more so this one which is there now, is that CDF has been identified as one of the tools that can be used to actually advance the decentralization agenda. And so I needed to make that clear. So I don't want to see anyone saying, no, TIZ is against CDF. We are not against CDF, and that has to be made clear. So when you ask about whether CDF was done hurried, I mean, CDF did not start under this regime. CDF has always been there from time immemorial, if I may put it that way. So I don't think we can say that it was hurriedly done, the whole idea of CDF, because like I said, CDF is a great idea that can advance development. But I think for us, the concerns that we are raising, and I think the overall concern that we have, has to do with the exponential increases that we have seen on the budgetary allocation for CDF, okay? Because when the first increment was done was it in 2021 or 2022? I can't remember, but I think it was the first budget under the UPND administration. We saw a very exponential increase, like way over 100%. I can't remember the percentage increase, but it was quite some exponential rise. And I think back then, we raised a lot of concerns which circulated around the capacity issues, like what capacities do we have in these local authorities to absorb such an increased, allocation of CDF. Okay, so for us, that was our, the basis of our concern, to say yes, there is this development, program and this empowerment program that is there, but if you are increasing it so much, have you done a study of some sort to see the capacities of the different local authorities to be able to, to absorb that? And of course, after that, we've seen with every single budget that has been presented, there has been an increase. And for us, the concern has been that, look, why is government just incessantly increasing these budgetary allocation without even doing maybe a study of some sort to say, okay, how did the first increase fare in terms of how did the local authorities fare in terms of that first increase? How are the capacity issues? What has been informing these incessant increases? I think for us, that is the key question that we have. Is it just, somebody just decides to say, okay, let's increase it to this? What has been the thinking behind these annual increases? And for us, those are the key questions that we are asking. So when you look at some of the things that, we have discovered, or rather that the Auditor General discovered in their report, I think it validates some of those original concerns that we had to do with the increased budgetary allocation for CDF. And that is why our first recommendation is that, look, don't do these increases. At least put a stop on the increment so that we can begin to reflect and look back and say, okay, what lessons can we learn from how these local authorities have been able to implement this? Why is it that in some provinces, the utilization is higher than in others? Like, what lessons can we draw from this? And so that those lessons can then inform what needs to happen in terms of how CDF is done going forward. So I thought I should just clarify those, and I hope that your question has been addressed. So we are not able to say now that, it was hurriedly done in terms of the whole idea of CDF itself. But in terms of the increment, we've always had concerns about the capacity issues of local authorities to be able to absorb these CDF increases. Hence, the recommendation we are making that for now, maybe we should not increase these funds anymore, but we should look at what has happened with these 3-4 increases that we've seen in the past, and what lessons can we draw from those, which lessons can then inform what we do with CDF going forward.
Maybe I can what I was looking at is when the CDF was first in place, there are conditions that are put in place. Like, you know that one person could access it, a set or an existing cooperative, which many of those people in areas where the court can get that, always are taking place. So now that's when Audit done came about, because when they did acquire those cooperatives to acquire CDF, and how they acquired those cooperatives, get that could also speak to some of the observations. Here's my question: were these things already done? Because if they are done in a proper way, they can even avoid what is happening. The proof of that, the report is speaking to itself.
Yeah. Maybe let me come in from this angle. I think that let's look at, I'm trying to address your clarification. Let's look at CDF not as an event, but as a process. And it clearly indicated that since we are pushing sums of money in this program, we should also have a very strong mechanism to learn from how we implement. So the issue that we are raising on is a lesson. And maybe for us, a call for caution is that before we move to another huge increase, which other components we have to look at and learn from and strengthen so that we perform better. Secondly, is a huge question that personally I have not gotten an answer around CDF. We have the 8th National Development Plan, which outlines where we want to see ourselves as the country in terms of development. Then we have CDF, which looks at constituency level, local level development. And sometimes I fail to understand why constituencies that are close to each other, like Chawama and Kawad, would both want to buy a tipper, buy a. You understand what? So you want to construct a clinic. There are parameters, acceptable distances that should exist between health facilities. You know that. Are they paying attention? Or is it a way of saying, oh, my fellow MP is doing this, let me also do the same? For me, the issue is how do we coordinate these local level development in such a way that they fit in the aspirations of the 8th National Development Plan or subsequent National Development Plans. We're not seeing that. And these are lessons that we need to learn from. Secondly, we can talk about citizens participating in development, but CDF actualizes that because you can point specific development projects that you will have participated in active, and that is something that should give you satisfaction. But the one finding that worries is one relating to soft loans and the finding around effectiveness in utilizing admin costs. So if on one side we are saying utilization is below acceptable percent, and then admin is showing over 98%. But the question is, what were they administering to spend that money? If utilization on projects is at 50%. I don't expect admin to be 98%. I'll accept if it is around 60%. Is admin a conduit through which money is being siphoned? Those are the questions I think we need to be asking. Again, when you look at the linkage between utilization towards soft loans and recovery of loans, there is a disparity there. I think we need to learn lessons and ask hard questions, because this is our money. This is the development that we want, and we need to have a strong say in what is happening around it. So again, we're not being political. We are just trying to say, can we learn from how we are implementing CDF?
Okay. Any other questions? Landing.
Good morning. Sorry for coming late. I know this question is tough. Last week, the president talked about communication, and this can happen in this year or next year. So if you maybe talk about evaluating how CDF are doing before the implementation itself, maybe wish that the government should evaluate CDF and maybe sort out the documents that are CDF for more constituencies of
Okay, any other questions before we get your response?
What you trying to clarify, because the invitation has, I don't know how to clarify the
the invitation, from my understanding, basically need more constituency. And with the CDF coming, let's say, CDF is evaluated. With more constituencies coming in, believe you will be a challenge. Okay.
Well, okay, thank you very much. How actually expect to reduce the inefficiency to the CDF? Because essentially what you are doing is you are asking yourself which constituencies are too big in terms of population size that we need to have to squeeze, right? And so into smaller size, so better, easier or better to manage size of the constituency. So if that happens, then you expect that perhaps there will actually be more efficiency in the management of the CDF, because now you have a smaller, maybe group of people, or number of people, or geographical area where the CDF is actually being implemented. So in that respect, that should maybe be important for this management of the CDF. Yeah. So it won't be a problem.
But also, I think when you talk about, there is a big question, and I know Tommy is passionate about this before. Does it make sense really to allocate uniformly this CDF? Are we paying attention to the needs of the constituency before allocating? So yes, when if that goes where the president said, the number of constituencies will increase, of course the implication is the allocation to CDF, isn't it? Under the current situation where you have the uniform allocation, and I think we should be asking questions. The needs of yeah, are they same as the needs of material? Let's be real. Does the uniform allocation make sense? Will it address the needs and development needs of the people of this constituency? I think let's start asking those questions so that we strengthen this very good program that resonates with people and the impact of development.
May I actually do that? I think there are a number of aspects that we consider. One is the fact that in previous budget speeches, the Minister of Finance has actually committed to introducing an allocative formula for CDF, which would mean they'll take into account the poverty levels, population, development disparities and so on. And actually, if I can remember, to the 2023 budget speech, when they said that from 2024 onwards, they'll begin to apply that. Right? That has not happened. Further, if you look at the decentralization policy, in the implementation plan for the decentralization policy, it also talks about the development of an allocative formula for CDF, which is meant to address those disparities that we are discussing. Right? So that is a very important aspect of CDF that needs to be addressed. Because as our head of programs mentioned, the development needs of Ndumwezi, of course, would not compare with Kawata. Yeah? And so that needs to be taken into account when we look at allocations for CDF. But at the same time, whether or not that has yet been applied, whether or not delimitation occurs, there are still governance issues that need to be addressed regardless, right? The capacities of the local authorities to absorb these amounts is extremely important. The example of Ndumwezi itself, where you only have less than 1% of allocations for community projects being utilized, that is not acceptable, right? That clearly points to areas where these local authorities need to be enhanced in terms of capacity on how to utilize these funds. Beyond that, there are also challenges around coordination around different constituencies. Are they looking at ways to synergize, right, to work together towards common goals? Ideally, CDF projects are meant to be aligned to the integrated development plan for the district, right? So there's supposed to be a development goal that they are all moving towards. But there's a question as to whether it's being adhered to, and whether or not these constituencies are really working together to ensure that this development is being applied.
Thank you so much. If there are no other questions, we're going to have closing remarks, just as well. Just as though you're the last person to speak, because you'll be giving the closing remarks.
Right, so first of all, we would like to thank yourselves as stakeholders, as members of the press, the media, to partner with us in this work of disseminating the type of analysis that we are doing today. Of course, it is very important for members of the public to understand, reports that come from the Office of the Auditor General. Sometimes they are very technical. People just see figures and tables, and they may not really understand what those things mean. And clearly, you can see that from the increased interest that the members of the public have had upon seeing some of the infographics and information that have already begun to share on social media. And so this is also a call for members of the public to take more interest into reading this information, ensuring that they are more plugged in to some of these processes that are taking place at the local level, encouraging them to engage their local authority, to understand further how they can participate in CDF, but also to understand how they can monitor CDF projects and be part of the protection and accountability of public resources for the benefit of all citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Can we have your closing prayer? Anyone to volunteer? Adora, you can pray for us. Father, we thank you, Lord, for this good, that you give us, Lord. Thank you for all the revelations and the belief. We pray for your justice, please help me protect you. Amen. Okay, so the press briefing has come to a close. Please see me for logistics after this, and if anyone is not in the TIZ and media groups, please also see me for that so that I can help you in the WhatsApp. Yes, I also have some hard copies.